Welcome back to the pharmaphorum podcast. In today's episode, I speak with Jane Reed, Director of Life Sciences at Linguamatics, an IQVIA company. In essence, machine learning in large language models is a case of very powerful technologies using, for example, neural networks, looking for answers from fed data. But you can't expect an answer or see the process from start to finish. It is a black box process. By contrast, deterministic AI permits a taking the lid off the box, so to speak, studying the algorithm in much more detail, a very much cleaner and more measurable white box process. And it is in this deterministic way that Linguamatics operates. In amongst the ins and outs of our conversation today, Jane also touches upon the future. Automation is, she says, keenly being sought after, but the automation of today is perhaps the AI of tomorrow. For more on this and other details, tune in and let us know your comments if you have any. As ever, thank you for listening. This is web editor Nicole Raleigh, and today I have with me Jane Reed, Director of Life Sciences with Linguamatics, an IQVIA company. Today we'll be discussing some of the major barriers that prevent researchers from accessing the data they need to advance drug discovery and development and address safety concerns. Welcome, Jane.
Hi, good to be here.
So speed and safety in drug development and discovery represent some of the biggest challenges and opportunities facing life sciences companies today. It costs around $1 billion, for example, to develop one successful drug, and only 1 out of 10 drug candidates successfully passes clinical trial testing and regulatory approval. Because drug development is so costly and the odds of success for any one candidate are so low, it is essential that life sciences companies accelerate the discovery process to quickly generate insights that help separate promising drug candidates from those unlikely to make a breakthrough. However, with new AI-based technologies such as next-generation NLP, machine learning, large language models, and Gen AI, pharma companies have never been better equipped to advance their safety processes. Indeed, Linguamatics itself helps healthcare and life sciences to innovate, automate, and scale simply and cost-effectively through AI and translation solutions. To begin with, though, today, Jane, perhaps you could tell listeners a little bit more about you, about your journey to what you do today with your work at Linguamatics.
Wonderful, yes. So thanks very much. That's a really good introduction to today's topic and, in fact, to the challenges that we're seeing across the pharma industry. So, yes, my name is Jane Reed, Director of NLP at Linguamatics, with a particular focus on where we bring AI technologies to help in pharma research development and post-market. So I've been working in the industry for several decades. I've generally been working in vendors selling data analytics, data science into the pharma industry. I did a PhD and then a couple of postdocs, and then in essence realized that academia was not going to be the place for me, and moved into working within industry then. And obviously, I've been working, so Linguamatics is a company that's about 20 years old. We've been providing natural language processing tools and technologies to pharma and healthcare organizations for most of that time. It's been profit-making since the start. And in essence, I moved into my role about a decade ago. And really, my role is looking at where there are key challenges across the pharma drug development, drug discovery pipeline, where unstructured text is one of the barriers, challenges to getting access to the right information. And hence, an AI technology such as natural language processing can really bring benefits.
A lot to take in there, and we'll come back to a couple of points you've raised there. So to kick off our theme, so to speak, then, what are some of the major barriers that prevent researchers from accessing the data they need? You mentioned a moment ago, was it unstructured text?
Yeah, so I mean, in essence, anytime when you're in, whether you're a bench scientist, whether you're further down the drug discovery, drug development pipeline, whether you're a clinician. A lot of the information you need to make a decision is in unstructured text. The kind of the well-discussed norm number is about 80% of all the data needed in life sciences is held in unstructured format. So that means if you're thinking about getting the landscape of information to make a decision from unstructured text, then in essence, you have to sit down and read that huge amount of information. So if we think simply about working in target discovery really early on, then ideally as a discovery biologist, discovery chemist, you want to understand the landscape of information that's available in literature, maybe in patents, maybe in Congress abstracts, around targets as involved in your particular disease area, multiple sclerosis, for example. And you could be having to read, in essence, hundreds or thousands of abstracts or full text papers. So if that's down to you, just read them, then in essence, generally, you'll read the top 1%, 5%, 10%. Whereas if you use an AI technology, you can augment that manual review by getting better search and surfacing the key facts, synthesizing them, which means that you as the researcher can spend more time thinking about the information you're looking at, as opposed to reading and extracting that information yourself.
Thank you. Yes, certainly we're hearing more and more about AI's applications when it comes to medical literature and review processes. So if we think about drug discovery itself, then how can AI advance drug discovery and development and address safety concerns? I mean, there seems to be so much that AI can do, Jay.
So first of all, I should kind of put a couple of boundaries around what we're talking about. So obviously AI is a huge field, from QSAR models for chemistry all the way through. I mean, it's just huge. So our focus, Linguamatics focus, is definitely around natural language processing and AI, artificial or augmented intelligence, in order to tackle natural language questions. So that's where the answers are in natural language in that unstructured text we've been talking about. So if we're thinking about how to bring value within kind of safety, then again, thinking back to that literature search, if you're trying to understand, you've got maybe a novel target or a novel compound you're interested in, and you want to know, is there any information over the last 20 years of research out there in the public domain around potential risks or potential liabilities for a particular drug target or a particular chemistry? Because obviously, while you talked at the start of the call, there's a huge attrition during drug discovery, drug development, and only 1 in 10 candidates gets through. But again, that cost, that $1 billion cost, if you can find out that a particular compound or a particular project is going to fail, then you want to fail that as early as you can to then give the chances of success for those other projects. So that ability to look across historic and legacy and current information to find any information about risk, around liability, around safety, can really help with your drug discovery pipelines.
So if we tunnel down a bit further into NLP and think about, actually just off the cuff, the name itself, Linguamatics, what's inspired that? There are the obvious interpretations of the name and the not so obvious. Perhaps you could broaden out on that for us, Jane.
So, I mean, I wasn't around at the founding of the company, but it's you're absolutely right. It's kind of a play on words, on language, and it's looking at how to get that automatic, so that's the matics, ability to understand language, linguistics. So the founders were really looking at, in many ways, they had a couple of options. They could either have started working on the ability to handle spoken text, such as kind of Siri, or the ability to handle written text. And because of the interest in working with the pharma industry, where there is just a huge volume of unstructured text that's relevant for scientists and clinicians. I mean, if we think, we've been talking mostly about kind of literature examples, but if you think about working within healthcare organizations, and again, being able, there's a huge amount of information within hospitals. Now we have so many more hospitals using electronic medical records. There's a lot that's structured within those records, but there's still a huge amount that's unstructured. And again, there can be in the reports that come through for clinical trials, there can be adverse events being reported within those notes and being able to, again, surface that information much more effectively. So really the idea was to be able to kind of get that automatic understanding of language, linguamatics, across the healthcare industry to really think about where we can bring value.
So if we think about that automatic portion of operations, as it were, if we go back further, what's facilitating that automatic process is a learning process for the AI itself. So what's Linguamatics' role in the teaching of the AI for the purposes of, as you say, whether in a hospital and EHR scenario or a medical review scenario? What does Linguamatics do there?
So that's a really good question. So taking a kind of step back. So firstly, natural language processing is not just one technology in essence. So we now have, as you said at the start, we have machine learning, we have large language models, but we can also use a whole slew of different technologies and tools to find the right information in unstructured text in an accurate and speed effective way, and then surface that information. So what Linguamatics brings to the table is a technology we've developed in-house, which brings kind of deterministic white box natural language processing with rules that you can build and examine and audit, ontologies and vocabularies that you can use. So when I'm talking about ontologies and vocabularies, it's things like being able to say, these are all this, if we're thinking back to patients and we're thinking about social determinants of health and health inequities, then being able to have all the right language and be able to find, problems with walking, ambulatory issues or social issues and so forth from unstructured text. Thinking back to our drug discovery point of view, there are so many different ways to describe any particular gene or target or disease that having those deterministic white box rules means that you could really find the information and surface it in a very effective and clean and measurable way. And then you can move into using things like the generative AI to start then having, surface the information. You can then start summarizing it. You can use other tools, machine learning tools, to look for novel topics as well as the known topics that you can build with your rules. So it's a whole combination of NLP approaches to surface, in essence, that kind of clean, measurable information from unstructured text.
Thank you. So this ties in very well, as we were discussing earlier, with the notions of safety and doing away with the sort of unlikely to succeed earlier in the process. So if we stick with these keywords, really, of effective, clean, and measurable, what next then for AI technologies? How far away until, let's sort of hypothesize that the AI gets to a point where it's already clean, it's already at its utmost measurability? Is there that endpoint, or is there always a step beyond that in the future?
So I think there's always going to be a step beyond, just because, 2-3 years ago, we wouldn't have known we were going to conceive large language models, if that makes sense. So quite what's going to be around the corner in a year's time, who knows? It's exciting. But specifically, so I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and some of the keynotes were very much talking about how one of the critical things within pharma and healthcare is there is so much data that's used to train your models. Whether it's the deterministic models that we've been talking about from the core Linguamatics capabilities, or whether it's the machine learning and large language models. And it is critical to be able to understand how we generate that data, control that data, look for bias within the data, make sure it's very clean data. The classic is garbage in, garbage out, and that's just as true for the most recent AI innovations as always has been. So I think that's always going to be a really important focus with how we develop our understanding of AI for safety. And one thing that I think is very interesting is I was at a couple of safety conferences last autumn, and obviously everyone is hugely keen to augment their safety processes. There's a lot of manual processes. It can be quite a slow workflow. And everyone's very keen to hear about automation. but there's a lot of concern about AI. And going to your point, what's coming in future, and it does feel a little bit to me that the automation of today is the AI of tomorrow, because the AI is unknown and novel and innovative. But when it gets to automation, it's actually an AI technology, but it's one that's got scope and boundaries, and we really understand it. We can explain it. And I think when we get to that point with, some of the machine learning models, the large language models, that will give everyone a lot more confidence in the results that come out of the more black box AI.
Just sorry, as an add-on question, actually, because you've got me thinking now, can we just make it clear for listeners what you meant a bit earlier with this deterministic white box rules, as opposed to what we mean in these conversations when you say black box? Can you just make that clear?
Sorry. So in essence, the thing with machine learning and the large language models, it's very powerful technologies that are using behind the scenes things like neural networks to come up with answers from the data that it's been fed. But from the outside, you can't inspect the answer and see the process from the start to the end and understand the exact reason why a particular answer has been given. With deterministic AI, then very much you can take the lid off the box. You can inspect the algorithm in much more detail, and you can understand how the output has been achieved following the workflow back to the input and the output. So white box means you can, in essence, take the lid off and really understand why you've got to a particular result. And that means that you can inspect those rules and you can say, well, I realize that, there's a bias, or I'm missing particular data, or I'm getting data I don't want. And you can, in a very kind of human interactive way, change your rule and see the output. When it comes to machine learning, obviously you can change your input and your output, but it's much less obvious, if that makes sense, hence the black box.
Thank you for that explanation. And thank you indeed for this conversation. It's been a pleasure, Jane.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed.
And so that concludes another episode of the pharmaphorum podcast. You can find more information about this episode, including a download link and information about previous instalments at pharmaphorum.com/podcasts. The Pharmaphorum podcast is also available on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon Music, Podbean, and pretty much wherever you get your other podcasts. Just search for Pharmaphorum and press subscribe. Of course, don't forget to visit our website itself, where you can sign up for daily and weekly news and analysis bulletins. And do follow us as well on X or Twitter and LinkedIn at pharmaphorum. That's all for now. Thank you for listening.